Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk here on XEP. Today we'll be chatting Call of Duty. We'll be looking at it hitting Game Pass day and date on day one. We're looking at our expectations for Summer Game Fest. And of course, we'll be interacting with you in the chat. My name is Luke Lord, the Insipid Ghost. And today I am joined by the founder of Spawn on Me, one of the internet's premier gaming podcasts that does exceptional work in spotlighting gamers, developers, and content creators of color. Welcome one, Khalief Adams.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be rocking and big fan of the work you've been doing for a very long time. So getting a chance to be on the show is always fantastic. So thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it. I'm honored to have you here. It is an absolute pleasure. I've been a fan of Spawn on Me for a very long time and excited that we get to collab. And goodness knows we were graced with some news for this week. That's for sure.
We got some stuff to talk about for sure. It sounds like the cat is finally out of the bag in the biggest way. So excited for that for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm glad that I was debating, of course, because today we got the news that Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is day and date into Game Pass. This is a big deal for a lot of reasons. We got a lot of details on Black Ops 6 that seem to be emerging ahead of the launch. But what's so fascinating about this to me is that we're going into Game Pass day one, and they chose to announce it now as opposed to waiting for the Xbox Direct. Also, shout out to Jalen in chat. It's one of my students who just now is headed to high school. Good to see you, Jalen.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so the idea that they are headed to Game Pass day one and they chose to say it now, Khalief, as opposed to at the Direct. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think at this point they needed to kind of get that out of the way. I think they're clearing space for the Summer Games Fest stuff that we're going to get a chance to see, because I do think that they may have some surprises up their sleeve. I think, for Summer Games Fest, it's now the premier version of what we used to have in terms of, E3 coverage has now been supplanted by Summer Game Fest. And now, with all of the news that is kind of broken in the beginning of 2024 for Xbox, both good and bad, I think they're trying to figure out some ways to right the ship in a lot of different ways. I think they're trying to get, folks who are still either upset about the conversations about multi-platform games happening from their side of the fence, still trying to, court those folks and get them back on their side. Still trying to make the overall case of like why you should buy an Xbox and why it's important to be in the Microsoft ecosystem. And I think thirdly, I think they're still trying to figure out, coming off of Hellblade, which I think was a pretty big success for them, how do you bolster what has been, negative news around Game Pass's growth and the value proposition that it adds for folks who are at home, right? I think the big ticket item was always going to be, once the ABK acquisition happened, was Call of Duty. And there was some trepidation still there, trying to figure out like, what does this mean overall for the strategy? Is this going to be in Game Pass day and date? What does this mean for our competitor and their folks on their end of the fence? Because now if it's in Game Pass, it's part of this subscription service, as opposed to on the PlayStation side where you'll probably have to pay for it. How do you message that out? So I think they're testing the waters of what does that mean for them going forward, and giving themselves some room to not have that be a part of the conversation for Summer Games Fest. Get that out of the way early so you can talk about other stuff.
I tend to agree. I think there was a narrative that was being spun up outside of Xbox's control, and had they not addressed it now, that narrative might have gone too far, and the script essentially written. And so what's exciting about this is now that we know, the focus can be on the game.
Yeah.
And not the question of whether or not it goes. Shout out to James Suddy in chat. Suddy just finished a double organ transplant 2 days ago. He got a new kidney and a new pancreas.
Oh,
yeah. Really good to see you, Suddy, man. I'm glad you're in chat and awake
glad
and
you're
doing well.
here with us. No doubt.
Yeah. One of my best friends. We had a summer trip planned to ride roller coasters, Khalief, in July. And he had the audacity to apologize that we wouldn't get to ride roller coasters. We're like, what? We've been waiting 5 years for this. What are you talking about?
I'm happy you're here, man. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, big time. But yeah, getting ahead of that narrative, saying, no, it's in Game Pass. This is what's happening. This is what we're doing. To me, I think was the right move, as opposed to waiting, because I think sometimes in the social spaces, narratives get run out of proportion, and they lose track of what's going on.
1,000%. I mean, they lost the battle of the who has control of voice.
Hmm.
They lost a lot of that last year towards the end of it, with a lot of the kind of, influencer conversations about who was no longer a part of the influencer crowd for Xbox, and who were the
Hmm.
folks who stayed, and who were the folks that, shared information around, what did they think the kind of forecasting was going to be. And a lot of folks got, stepped on in a lot of different ways, both from a self-imposed perspective and from a kind of internet zeitgeist version of that, which I thought was really interesting to see, kind of fanboyism take a big hit
Hmm.
at the end of last year, which I thought was necessary and validating to a lot of folks who don't do that work. But I think this is going to be a thing where they're still trying to figure out how to bridge that messaging gap. I think Xbox as a whole has had some messaging issues over the past, couple of years,
Hmm.
and they're still trying to right that ship. I think the most recent, potential faux pas that people have leaned into was the, post the acquisition and then the layoffs that happened.
Hmm.
And then with more studios getting laid off, and then having, folks like Sarah Bond have to kind of, take the reins and have that conversation publicly, and people feeling like that messaging wasn't on point.
Hmm.
They're still working their way through some of it, with now her leading the way in that way, and kind of Phil taking a step back to take a more a bigger leadership role behind the scenes. This is it's really going to be interesting to see what happens in the next year or so. We still
Hmm.
have a new hardware potential refresh that's
Hmm.
coming out of the gate. We don't know anything about that yet. We will see what happens with the Summer Games Fest, opportunities that wind up there. And I still think, the chips have not really fallen yet for what worked with Hellblade, right? I
Hmm.
think a lot of folks are looking at the conversations around COD, and,
Hmm.
and making exclamations, and forecasting what does this mean for sales, and what does this mean for all this other stuff. We know Call of Duty is going to be a game that is going to bring massive folks over to the platform either way. Or no,
Hmm.
I shouldn't say to the platform, but I say massive folks are going to play it. We know it's a game
Hmm.
that gets a lot of players into the funnel. But what does this mean overall for adoption? I think
Hmm.
that's going to be the biggest thing that we see happening later. Does this move the needle in terms of subscriptions for Game Pass? And does this actually mean that putting a game this big is going to change the way people think about purchasing? So
Hmm.
there's a lot of things out in the ether that we still haven't figured out yet, and I don't think we'll know until much later in this year. And we'll see, what the steady trends are going to wind up being. So it's a lot of stuff that has to come out of these findings, and we haven't seen any of it yet.
I there are several points that you touched on that I really lock in on. The first is which that we don't really know what Hellblade has done for Xbox,
Mm,
right? I will say candidly that I was fortunate to get to play it in the vacuum of reviewers,
hmm.
which is great. By
Yes.
the way, that is the best way
That's
to
the
enjoy a
best.
video game, because nobody's out there condemning it or telling you that it's the next second coming of Half-Life or something. You're just playing a video game. So I got to really enjoy my time with it. And I encourage everybody to check out XCP's review, check out your review. I listened to your review twice now at this point, just in prep for the show. And I really appreciated the take. So I'll point people towards that.
Thank you.
But I think what Hellblade does for Game Pass is really interesting. What Hellblade does for Xbox is interesting because
Mm,
it's not that full AAA $70 release by Xbox's own choice of pricing it at 50 as
hmm.
opposed to 40, which I thought I agreed with you on.
Hmm.
But then also, it's not Hi-Fi Rush Pentiment size.
Hmm.
And then you've got the closing of Tango. You got the comments of Matt Booty. We won award-winning games. Where does Hellblade stand?
Hmm.
And a lot of questions are going to be asked about that because there's no box sales to point to.
Yep.
And so I think that the narrative for, or what we see rather, for what Hellblade does for Xbox, we won't find out for some time.
I mean, I think that we'll see, and we know this to be a trend that always happens, is
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we don't have box sales because physical is kind of going away in a lot of different ways. And a lot of folks, I think the MPDs, if you're not familiar with the MPDs at home, that's a way that folks chart, how game sales are doing. Um, we will see alongside the accolades trailer when it happens for Hellblade that's when you'll start to see adoption conversations happen for that game. I wonder what it's going to wind up looking like, because you don't get to futz the numbers when the numbers are digital in those ways. It will be telling to see what kind of like KPIs and performance indicators they do showcase and share publicly. I think that will be the telltale kind of, forecasting of where this game landed. And I think that's going to be really smart, right? Like, I think they are trying to bolster the image or the kind of idea around what Xbox is doing and how their games are performing. But also with that conversation, I'm happy you talked about it. The closing of Tango and other studios like that, you know, this will be a way for them to do a little bit of sentiment scrubbing and saying, hey, we are taking care of studios that are still with us. We're promoting them in big ways. We're trying to figure out good ways to give them the most advantage by giving them early access to our hardware. You see what they did with Hellblade, which is by far right now the best looking game on any console on the planet.
Fully agree.
And I think that's where we'll wind up seeing a lot of that messaging coming through in a way that is going to hopefully resonate with players to say like, oh, I didn't make that mistake of keeping my Xbox or being invested in the ecosystem. So we'll see where it lands, but I think it'll be cool to see what happens in the next couple of months and towards the end of the year.
My hope is that we get to see Hellblade exist in those sizzle reels, in those moments of here's why you should have an Xbox, because to me it's a very special experience. And whether you go there wanting God of War or thinking you're getting that walking simulator, and it truly, I believe it exists somewhere in between those two, there's a great experience to be had. And I would argue that I'm kind of a fan of the length of time that it spends in there, given my Game Pass investment, because that's perfect for my schedule. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things of just like, man, I wanted a couple of more hours out of it. It wind up my gameplay experience with that game probably ended around like 6 to 7 hours. And most of the extra kind of hour was me running around in photo mode because I love photo mode. But that game could survive as an 8 to 10 hour game and be perfect in terms of length, right? And I do think, you kind of remarked about it or commented about it, but like pricing is going to be really important for Game Pass games now in a much bigger way, right? Like the justification for what is a 6 hour to 7 hour game at the highest fidelity levels, and wherever you are on the combat, like I think the combat was really actually pretty dope. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the narrative for what this game is going to be. And then what does COD get priced as at this point? That has to be a full price game on Game Pass, right? Like for folks who aren't invested into the subscription service, that game has to still be a $70 game for just how big it is and how much stuff you get. So that's going to be telling to see what the pricing structure for in and out of Game Pass is going to be. And do you wind up then giving discounts to folks who are, in that ecosystem in any form? Do you just say you get a day and date and that's it? Are there any extra perks that go along with that? So there's a lot of stuff that they have to kind of figure out messaging wise. Hence the reason why they got all that stuff out early.
Fully agree with you, and you touched on several points that I want to bring up. Before I lose the moment, though, I do want to thank Ainsley Bowden with a $5 super chat saying, nothing specific to say, just want to shout out and support XEP. Great to see the legend Ka here. Cheers. Fully agree, Ains. It's a pleasure for me, and good to see you here, buddy. Thank you for the shout out. He's such a good dude.
Such a good dude.
Fun fact, the computer I'm using right now, he sold me at a discount because he knew I was trying to make content. So
I love it. I love it.
He's good
Ains.
people.
He's dope.
Guys, keep the questions coming. I've been starring them so I can go back to them. Okay. But you brought up pricing, and I think pricing is one of those interesting parts, because as we get into the Call of Duty section of our conversation, that's going to be huge because they stand to lose console sales for the Xbox side, but I'm curious what that truly does. does it make a dent or not? So I'm going to come back to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say to Mr. Badbit, saying a shout out to Suddy. It's good to see Suddy doing well, and good to see Mr. Badbit in chat. I do hate him though. He's ugly kid, you know.
I love it.
If you have a frenemy in Paris, Joe is mine. So
I love it.
Let's see. Suddy does have a question for us. He says, do we think Hellblade will hit other platforms? I'm resoundedly say yes to this. I just think it's a matter of time, and I don't have a problem with that despite covering Xbox's XEP. I don't mind one bit that Hellblade makes its way to another platform, provided it's part of Game Pass. That tends to be my take. What's your take on that?
Ooh, I mean, I think it will, but I don't think it should. And that's
okay.
Like, I think the thing that Xbox still has to do is still make the case, right? Like, I think I don't want to give too much credence to the online mob, right? And I think the online mob who was in there, you know, being the most mad about, you know, Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush going to PlayStation. I think those examples just didn't make a lot of those examples made a ton of sense. Older games have been established, have had a place to land in the Xbox community first to be able to get that stuff in there. Hellblade is now at that moment now where we see that being a thing. But I do think that Xbox needs to hold on to some titles. I think it does make sense for them to be able to say, you can only get this here. Or at least if it's going to be, you can only get this here, it has to be for a fair amount of time, right? I think you have to balance out the amount of exclusivity that you have based on, you know, what's the zeitgeist say, and does it feel like our, you know, diehard fans have gotten a chance to really embrace this yet. And I think that's going to be a telling part of the numbers game that they see in the back end to see, okay, so we had this much adoption, this amount of people downloaded it. We're assuming that this many people finished it because they'll be able to track achievements and see, you know, how many folks finished it or, you know, got to the end of it, that kind of stuff. And then you say, all right, cool. If you want to give this to the competitor to say, you know, we want to also put a little carrot on the end of the stick to maybe have you come over and join us on Team Xbox, then I think it makes sense. But I think it really just depends on how long of a time does it sit. Because you do, you know, we are, again, at a space where we have so many games to play, so many games are coming out, and you have to capitalize on the good energy that a game has around it. And it's weird because I don't know how much you've been keeping up with the conversations around cinema of late, right? Where you're seeing, oh, okay, Furiosa and Dune, you know, those movies did crazy numbers, or Furiosa didn't yet, but like those movies did crazy numbers in the theaters, or didn't, and are moving to digital much faster than we saw in previous iterations of entertainment. I think, again, it's that zeitgeist, right? How much do you capture in that moment and are able to do it? And also giving that value proposition to folks to say, well, like, if you have it here, what are the things you're going to get? So that winds up being a messaging conversation, I think, is really important for them to nail. And timing is going to be the biggest part of that conversation for them.
Ah, man. I love the idea that they need to keep that carrot on the end of the stick. I agree with you to a point, and I don't know, I guess in my mind, I'm not bothered if it goes multi-platform.
Yeah.
But as far as what Xbox needs to do, should do,
right.
I guess if you ask me 1 week, I'll be one side of the line. Another week, I might change it for the exact reasons that you listed. And I think about, is Hellblade going to bring people into the Xbox ecosystem? No, I don't think so. But would it keep them there? Or would it give them a reason to keep that subscription longer? Is it beyond, you know, you get COD, but then you also get to play Hellblade. You also get to play Hi-Fi. You get to play Sea of Thieves or something like that. Then maybe there is credence to that. I'm informed by the PlayStation exclusivity deals we've seen in the years past of 1 year timed exclusive. That, in my mind, is what makes sense. Do you think I'm conditioned to think that, or does that make a reasonable sense?
We're all kind of conditioned by that, to be fair. Like, you know, we have an expectation for things based on the things that we've seen happen in the past. And I guess the question I would have to folks on the PlayStation side of it would be, one, are you excited at seeing a game like this? I mean, if you take off your fanboy hat and you're looking at it just as a person who wants to play cool stuff,
Hmm.
and you're like, ooh, that looks like that's kind of cool for me to be able to play. If you're not on PC as well, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think the answer would be yeah. I think most folks who were looking, who were Team Green all the way and on Team Xbox for forever and didn't have a PlayStation, I'm sure a lot of them saw Last of Us and Uncharted and all of those things. And if they weren't a multi console home, they were like, man, I really wish I could play that stuff, right?
Hmm.
I don't see why Hellblade would be different in that way. I mean,
Hmm.
it's an even shorter use of time to be able to get in and out of that world and say, okay, that was pretty cool to be able to do it
Hmm.
at a much lower price point potentially,
Hmm.
to get into the world of what Xbox is kind of pulling together. I don't know yet if Microsoft has done enough work in terms of the games though
Hmm.
to give it that thrust where it gets into a space where people are talking about it in that same way, right?
Hmm.
Because you need a mix of both. You need the games to be good, and you need enough people talking about it in positive ways to pique your interest to say, "Oh, this wasn't the thing that was on my radar, or it was on my radar. Maybe I'll jump ship for a little bit and do a little bit of work on that side." So
Hmm.
you have to build up enough goodwill to be able to do that. And I still don't think Microsoft has done that yet. I think we'll see what that looks like when we get more conversations around hardware,
Hmm.
down the year. And again, we may get some cool stuff that drops at Summer Games Fest that we didn't expect. That might also bubble that conversation up for people who are outside of the ecosystem. So there's a lot of things for them to do to get that messaging out right.
I tend to agree, though I am doubtful we see hardware at this point. I would love it. It'd be dope. But
Yeah.
I'm doubtful for it. I do think Hellblade and Starfield, kind of as two recent Game Pass additions, are set aside from a lot of the other games in Xbox's portfolio in that they are largely single player
Hmm.
and they are largely not microtransaction driven. And I say largely, they're not microtransaction driven. I should say that there is an expansion that's coming with Starfield, and Xbox did some uh, unique things again with pricing structure is for $30 upgrade if you want to go to X edition or you want to get
Hmm.
these editions included. And now with Call of Duty, set to drop into all three levels of Game Pass, uh, they now are giving Call of Duty to every Game Pass subscriber, which currently I believe at last point was 34 million players potentially jumping into Call of Duty by way of Game Pass. And interestingly, that's a very small market share comparatively of how many people actually playing Call of Duty,
Yep.
paying full price for it. And whether they're buying the base model, the Black Cell edition, the Battle Pass, cosmetics. So Hellblade and Starfield, I think, exist in this unique spot of figuring out pricing. Meanwhile, Grounded, Sea of Thieves, and
Hmm.
Call of Duty have these massive pay scales that you can dive into for potential profit.
Yeah. It will. I think that is going to be the kind of like aha moment
Hmm.
for not only for Xbox but for Xbox fans who are
Hmm.
in the Game Pass ecosystem is what does this mean for expansions? What does this mean for battle passes? What does this mean for the piecemeal parts of the microtransaction MTX layer of it? For folks who are just kind of used to again like what you must do if you're a Call of Duty fan. You buy that base game. If you want to cash out a little bit extra and get some COD points, it's
Hmm.
because you know you're going to be in that ecosystem. You buy the version above that, right? And then you say, okay, I know I'm going to be invested in this game, so I'm going to buy the battle passes. It's going to be cool guns and skins and all that stuff.
Hmm.
What does that mean if you've already gotten the base game? Because you're not going to get the enhanced versions of it
Right.
in Game Pass. You're going to get the base version.
Hmm.
What are going to be the things you add on, and does that feel like a value add because you're cutting out that first layer of I have to spend $70 right out the gate
Hmm.
and then spend another $30 or $25 on a battle pass out of the gate to be like not even to be competitive, to be in the FOMO right versions of it,
Hmm.
right? Because that's what most of the transaction stuff are. Like there are very few games at this point that are putting microtransactions into a game that affects the way that you play it. It
Right.
is really about the peacocking of wearing all this cool stuff and being like, I got this cool thing with Snoop in it or whatever in it, and be like, I want to run around as that person. So it'll be cool to see what they do if they add any incentives to Game Pass to make that purchase a little bit easier or cheaper or any of that stuff. Knowing that the install base is already there, because that's the beauty of this, is they already know the numbers, and it can only go up in terms of Call of Duty in that respect. All the other games that are in that mix don't have that. Starfield is a new IP. Hellblade 2 is a game that did okay, but it wasn't like a blockbuster hit. Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush was a surprise hit. Pentiment still in that mix, which was a great game. I'm sure it didn't sell amazingly well.
Right.
So like, this is the canary in the coal mine for what Game Pass can be for a big game in that respect. Because Diablo, even in that conversation, doesn't feel like that. It's a very niche game. Not a lot of people play it, but it's not a thing that when you think about, it's not going to get a big commercial during the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
So this will be cool to see what winds up happening for that larger conversation of what does it mean? Did the numbers match in a lot of different ways, and do you have ways to go up?
In prep for your and I conversation, I listened to Brad Sam's conversation about he put out a video where he did some napkin math, admittedly, about just how many people bought or how much revenue Modern Warfare 2 brought in. And it was pretty substantial. But what was interesting, and I jotted down some of this, in the first week or so, Modern Warfare 2 sold 4.4 million copies on PlayStation. So on PlayStation, 4.4 million, beating out FIFA. And this was information that came from the FTC trial, so it was substantiated. And that was roughly 30% of the $1 billion record sales that Call of Duty had. To me, that's very interesting because when you look at, that's PlayStation's market influx for Call of Duty.
Sure.
And we know that Xbox has a much smaller install base by comparison. What I found interesting from it is that even at Game Pass Core, say you're at the very base level for Call of Duty, how much money is Xbox going to benefit from or lose realistically if you stay signed in on Game Pass for 3 months? And if you're at Ultimate and it's suddenly $17 a month, if you stay in at 3 months or 4 months for Call of Duty, plus whatever ecosystem boost you get from purchasing cosmetics, doing that peacocking, which, Kyle, I got to tell you, I am not mature enough to avoid that. I absolutely buy skins. I'm that guy.
1,000%.
I gotta show off.
1,000%.
I was Godzilla for like 2 months. It's been great.
I was a dude that was a ghillie suit made out of weed. I will totally. They make good skins for most of that stuff. Like
They really do.
The boys integration that they did was so good. Like I bought those skins instantly. So I'm not above it.
Yeah,
I'm not above it at all.
I know my buddy Clint in chat. Good to see you, Clint. He's really excited. He's like, the Gundam skins got me to re-download it. That's the power of Call of Duty, right? That's the power of skins and crossover marketing. You know,
1,000%. Yep.
It's
bad at that game, but I will buy skins.
Same. My buddies and I, we win fairly often in Warzone. We do pretty well. We jumped in with a friend outside of our game group the other night, Ka, who was sweaty. And I was just like, whoa, too much. No, thank you. The MMR is raised, and I'd like to be back down here, please.
Yep. I'm like, oh, these are the people who play. I'm like, okay, I am not supposed to be in here. It's my yearly, like most people go and get their yearly checkup at the doctor to be like, all right, am I in decent health? My yearly checkup to see how old my reflexes have gotten is playing COD every year.
That should be it. At 40, you get your colonoscopy, you get your blood checked, and you play 6 rounds. See what's up.
1,000%. You're like, oh, that was not a KD. That was just
Humbling.
a D. That was just deaths.
Yep.
There were no kills on my end.
Yep. Cheeseworks dropped a question in. And guys, you can too. I'm starring them to use them later. It says, do you believe that COD on Game Pass is also justified due to the success of the free-to-play game X Defiant? I hesitate to say X Defiant's landed just yet, and I also, with respect to X Defiant and the team making it, I don't think they get to yet say they're a Call of Duty competitor on the levels of finances and numbers that we're talking about. What do you think?
I having played a fair amount of X Defiant, that game is nowhere near COD in terms of competency, in terms of offerings, in terms of a lot of things. Even though I like some of it,
Hmm.
but that game needs a lot of work still to kind of get into a space to even be, mentioned in the same breath as Call of Duty in that way. I'm hoping for a Call of Duty competitor. I was hoping that was going to be Battlefield, and hoping that Battlefield turns it around in a big way. But I think X Defiant, because you can get in and kind of start that process from a free to play perspective.
Hmm.
I think the things that balances it out are not there yet from that other MTX layer. The microtransactions aren't as cool as in X Defiant as they are in COD, because COD has way more things to play off of.
Mm.
You're only playing off of basically 4 different IPs within the Ubisoft ecosystem. And although there are really cool things in that,
Hmm.
they don't really link into those other things. If anything, X Defiant made me want to go play some of the older games that I hadn't had a chance to play in a while. Like, I
Hmm.
need to go back and go play some Watch Dogs
Mm.
after playing in that game, and that's what that game has done. Has been like, it makes me want to go back and play other stuff that Ubisoft
Interesting.
has made before. But it doesn't make me want to play it in terms of like, if I do want to play a sweaty FPS game, that is
Hmm.
not the one that I want to play yet.
That's fair. That's fair. And a lot of people in chat are talking about, the game being on PC versus, on Xbox, PlayStation. But is it not console? Is it not coming to console soon? I'm not an X Defiant.
X Defiant? No, I've
Right.
been playing it on both Xbox and PC.
Oh,
Xbox
okay.
and PlayStation and PC. So I've been playing across all of them.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I wasn't sure if it was just a PC launcher or not. Okay, gotcha. Um, well, the idea of you mentioned Battlefield, and EA is one of the partners mentioned in Summer Games Fest. Uh, I'm curious to know just what happens with Battlefield, because that game has been in that franchise has been in such flux,
Mm-hmm.
given Battlefield 2042, and I would argue it's fair to say the disastrous launch that it was, versus where it seems to be now, where those who are still playing it seem very high on it. Clint in our chat is a big Battlefield fan. My buddy Kev plays a lot. Those are anecdotal references, but do you anticipate seeing Battlefield at this summer's Game Fest or no?
No, I mean, I think that they have too much work to do to get that game into a good spot. Like, it's got, like, Battlefield has turned a corner, and I think, like a lot of folks in chat have been talking about, and a lot of folks in my circles have been talking about, it is better now than it's ever been in comparison to where it started. Is it Battlefield 4 level? No. Like,
Hmm.
that version of what was the kind of peak of Battlefield, at least in my mind,
Hmm.
it has not gotten back to where that level has been, and it's going to take a really long time, and them having to rethink a lot of systems that are within that space. Because you think about it, like, the latest Battlefield, if you think about it in sections and pieces, has
Hmm.
really smart stuff in it, but execution wasn't great.
Hmm.
And because we are now in a space where you don't have a lot of time to get your game good anymore before people move on,
Hmm.
it has been cool to see diehards stay with Battlefield in that way and kind of continue to, work with the development teams to give them good feedback to get that game in a good spot. But even now, when I jump in, there are too many things that I think about that don't feel good in comparison to what I want.
Hmm.
Like, you still have to bring down team sizes. I think 32 is probably still the sweet spot as opposed to 64, and definitely not 128,
Hmm.
which everybody got excited about. And I was like, do you not understand how bad that is?
Yeah.
I was like, everyone's hyped for 128. I was like, did you not play Mag? I was like, that game was not great. That amount of people is not great unless you have wildly big maps, right? And those maps are
Hmm.
big, but they're still not big enough.
Hmm.
And it's going to take a lot of other small pieces, but there are good sections of what they're trying to do. I think Portal is brilliant.
Hmm.
What they try to do with Portal in there, and having all these older game types and older maps and older weapons and all that kind of stuff in the map, but it never really panned out because I don't think they explained it well enough and made the systems easy enough to kind of incorporate for people to really dig it. So I don't think we'll see it next. The thing I'm hoping that we see at Games Fest in terms of EA stuff is going to be Skate. Like, I'm hoping we get a chance to see some Skate.
Hmm.
I don't know if they're going to show it. Um, I hope that they have some college football, somewhere in there.
I think they have to because they lack any other big title, do they not? Like
Yeah,
for
I don't.
this year, sports and NCAA is kind of their new. They're new.
Basically, like that stuff is going to have to come to fruition and showcase itself somehow. And again, they might have some hidden bangers that we don't know about, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't foresee Battlefield being there this year.
Kinzera, that was an EA original, right? Tales of
Yep.
Kinzera.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Okay, so I was thinking about their EA originals, and I was talking to Logan the other day. Tales of Panzera and Immortals of Avium, two games that we at XCP just adore.
Hmm.
And shout out to Abu, wonderful interview. I really enjoyed it,
He's
chatting with him.
fantastic. Yep.
Just a great dude. But I wonder what we see from EA Originals, if anything. You know.
Yeah, I mean they've proven, at least in my mind, that the EA Originals banner has a lot of worth in there. I
Mm-hmm.
think Kinzera was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to see. This is the time where I think they should go wacky though. Like I think, James in the chat is talking about we need a new SSX. Like that would be super cool.
Mm-hmm.
I still think that they are losing money every year by not revamping and reinvigorating EA Big, which was such a big thing. We've not even heard anything about the new NBA Live in
It's true.
forever. That game has not gotten any news, but I'm sure it's still in production some way and somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So like, they have stuff that they can dig into and figure out good ways to kind of bubble that stuff up. But if they don't do that, then we got to see what they do, because it's coming up on time where I feel like they also do need to showcase some new titles in a way that feel good for folks to be able to get into it. And now I think I saw a rumbling, and maybe I misread this, but I think even 2K is getting into the FIFA game.
Yep,
So
I saw that as well.
they potentially have some more competition on the horizon when it comes to that stuff. And there's a new NBA Jam-esque game that's going to be coming out fairly soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the folks who, I'm trying to think who they were. I can't remember, but they got Tim Kurtzau on it, doing the voice on it and stuff. So like, there's some fun sports titles that are in the mix, and F1 is dropping very, very soon too. So like, they have stuff, but they got to show some more single player, multiplayer stuff to really bolster that roster.
I'm inclined to agree, and a good point. I do think EA is just light on stuff that's not sports related right now, and it'll be interesting to see.
Yep.
Want to get to this $5 super chat from Will Lewis, who says, Game Pass has their perk section. What if for the launch of Black Ops on Game Pass, one of the perks is you get the Season 1 Battle Pass? And I'll open up that question to be like, or any other like cosmetic stuff. I don't see them doing the Battle Pass, Cobb, because they preached parity when they were during the trials, and I don't know if that would open them up to it. I do think perks is underused for Game Pass. And I think it could be taken advantage of. And Will, thank you for the super chat, man. I really appreciate it. Kyle, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a spot where any added kind of benefit they have to bubble up. Like the thing that people keep trying to figure out is like, what does an upsell look like in Game Pass, right? And that would be a version of it. Is what do you wind up getting outside of the base game, either at a discounted rate or because that's still parity. You know what I mean? Like, even if you were to say, hey, you can get the battle pass if you're a Game Pass subscriber, but you get it at $10 less.
Okay.
Like, you still have parity in terms of what the content is going to wind up being, so you're not locked out of that thing, but you're also incentivizing the purchaser and the player to say, oh, well, this is really a bargain. I'm getting, because I think the other part of that conversation in a much larger way is like, what is the value of Game Pass if you're not thinking about it? I have a ton of subscriptions that I'm sure I'm using and I'm not paying attention to when I get my credit card bill, and they're just there, right? So I think people are still thinking about like, oh, if I'm paying per month and I'm doing all this stuff, what does that mean? I think most people who are on Game Pass have just bought it and they're continuing to pay it monthly with the hope that dope games will be coming. I think this is a version of that where you get to up-res, or not up-res, you get to upsell, but also you're showing like, oh, this again is the reason why you want Game Pass. So they did it with EA. The EA subscription service is not folded into that, and I don't think a lot of people utilize it. right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when's the last time you used when you were like, "Oh, what's the EA game here? I might as well just do it because it's in Game Pass, and then just you can just do it." I don't think a lot of people still do that. They don't think about it because they don't leverage it in the ways they could. So, I think it's a good spot.
I think there'd be a neat opportunity for, that Redfall's the worst example, but like the Bite Back Edition upgrade or the
Yeah,
Starfield $30 upkick. Maybe you can up to the next edition from the base game, or if you have
right.
Ultimate or something like that. And that might be a way around it. But, and you're right, it does keep the parity if you do that upsell version. But as a perk, I don't know.
Right.
And I don't know.
Agreed. Yeah. Yep.
Just Play the Game had a question for us. Just Play the Game. I don't think I've seen you in chat. Good to see you. What's up? With so many shooters coming out or that are already out, Overwatch 2, Apex Legends, Marvel Rivals, Star Wars Hunters, where does X Defiant land there? I'll let you take this one first, Cobb, and I'll say also, like, we know that there are more shooters on the way, and there are others
Right.
still fighting for their life. Valorant's still out there doing its thing. You got a few
Hmm.
others. Valve's making one. Where does a new shooter go?
I think. I mean, it's hard now because you have, like you said, so much stuff in the mix. I think it's funny. I jumped back into Overwatch 2 over the past couple weeks, and I was like, oh man, this game is really fun. I forgot about how fun this was. I think Apex is always super sweaty if you're into that jam. Marvel Rivals is probably the most interesting one because of the way that the IP works alongside basically being Overwatch. And I think Star Wars Hunters is going to be more single player than anything else. So I think that doesn't really lean into the larger conversation. But I think X Defiant can be something really cool. I think it really has to figure out a way to differentiate itself
Mm-hmm.
in a way that makes people want to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have to think about what is the long tail. And this is the hardest part about doing a live service game. I've worked on at least one live service game before. And one of the conversations we always had is not only just how do you keep people in the ecosystem, but what does it mean to provide good value, again, to a player who has been there from day one and trying to figure out how to stay there for, day 361, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that mean for those players in that space?
Mm-hmm.
The problem with X Defiant is a couple of different things. They have to do a lot more in terms of their matchmaking. I
Mm-hmm.
think the killer thing that they did to themselves, or the thing that I feel like they might have shot themselves in the foot with on both ends, is there's one faction. I think it's the Echelon faction. That's basically like the Splinter Cell faction that has more health than anybody else in the game. So you have a differentiation in health. So everybody else starts off with 100, and these other folks start off with 120, which isn't great.
Yeah.
Two, I think I played their ranked mode, if I'm not mistaken, or at least you can test it to see what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a mix, because what you can usually do in X Defiant is you can match make based on input.
Mm-hmm.
If it's cross play and cross platform, you're at a huge disadvantage if you're on a keyboard. I mean, if you're on a controller and you're playing against folks on mouse and keys. We all know that already.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of dodge that by having input based matchmaking, which is there currently.
Mm-hmm.
But when you play in competitive ranked modes, it feels like that is not the case in that mode. So you're playing against, on a controller, I believe you're playing against anybody with a controller or mouse and keys. And you can instantly feel the difference in the way that a match feels if you're playing against somebody with mouse and keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
People snap to you so much faster. Their turn radius is instant, and it just feels unfair. And you can't, when you have a system in a game that feels unfair, people do not want to play it if they're competitive.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't feel good.
Right. It's no fun.
It's not fun. So I think they have a lot of stuff to kind of figure out in terms of where it lands, but I think they're going to have to either expand their universe into more factions, which I don't know. Like Assassin's Creed doesn't fit
Mm-hmm.
in that mix. So they kind of run out of spaces to play with things with guns. So I don't know where it's going to land. I foresee this game not living that long, to be honest. The
Mm-hmm.
game that I was excited for that didn't really get a chance to live was Hyenas, and that came out of Sega, and that was a really cool game that used Sega IP and music and all this other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't even get a chance to get out the gate. So
Let's say, we didn't see that hit market, did it? Did it?
nope. They shut it down before it even got a chance to go out to the world. Like they had a beta and they had a couple of things in there, and it was I really thought it was interesting and really smart and played well, but for some reason it studio shut down or something happened in that mix and they just decided to kill the project. But that game was cool, and sadly it didn't make it. So we'll see.
It could be that the shooter space is just that difficult to survive.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it really could be. And
Yep.
Sega not known for their prowess in shooters.
Yes.
Binary domain notwithstanding. I like that
Binary
game.
domain. Yeah.
I like that game.
Love that game.
Oh man. So we're kind of in the like who's at Summer Game Fest now. You mentioned 2K and we mentioned some of the EA stuff.
Yeah.
I went and looked at the partner list, which was a lot of not game developers or publishers, but also a bunch of them. They're kind of there. So like you might have I Am 8-Bit in that list of partners and whatnot, which I think is really cool for Jeff and his show.
Yep.
But I didn't see a ton of studios kind of on display in the initial list. I do like that I see PlayStation there. I like that I see Xbox there, Sega in there, SNK in there. One of the ones that kind of stood out in my mind was Bandai Namco is going to be there.
Yep.
And for some reason, I just got this Ace Combat feeling.
Ooh, that would be nice, actually. That would be
Wouldn't
kinda
it?
cool. That would be
Okay.
kind of cool. I mean,
right.
I've been dying for them to get Ace Combat into more VR spaces. I would love to see Ace Combat, if I'm not mistaken, because the PS VR 1 version, I think, had VR in it, and I don't think any other expansions got to the second version of the hardware. But I like Ace Combat has always been super fun. Like if you're into dogfighting, if you're trying to get your Top Gun on, like there is no other game that's better, except for an actual like proper simulator. But that would be cool. I would love to see that. That would be a lot of fun. I mean, I'm also sure that they're like getting all their Elden Ring kind of stuff together.
Oh yeah.
And there's rumblings about what, like, maybe we'll see some more Tekken news coming off a Combo Breaker that just happened, and a lot of different stuff in there. And I'm sure there'll be probably some Monster Hunter stuff that'll happen somewhere down the line. I think that's not them, is it? That's maybe Capcom. That's Capcom.
That's Capcom.
That's
and
Capcom.
But Capcom's also, and they've just wrapped up Akuma and Street Fighter 6. They're bound to have more stuff coming.
Yep.
I haven't put hands on with Akuma yet, but I was waiting for him.
Yeah, so. he's a monster from what I've seen. I've gotten real bad at Street Fighter.
Let's talk about at 40 you need to test yourself. I used to be a pro at Street Fighter 4. I was so good. Fight stick. Man, I jumped into 6. I got a new fight stick. I spent money on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't last a day. I didn't last a day. It hurts.
Come over
so
to
bad.
the Mortal Kombat side. It's a little bit more forgiving. I'm still wrecking people on MK with my old self, but
I might have to. I saw WB was having a sale, and I saw Mortal Kombat 1 on there. I thought about it.
I'm just saying they got the new DLC coming pretty soon. You got Homelander stuff dropping. Got Farah coming out. So now's a good time.
That's fair.
And Multiverses just came back, so Multiverses is back.
I just downloaded it right just before we recorded. I just downloaded it. I'm anxious to see how the move to Unreal goes for it. I like that they have a campaign.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out why, but I think the Unreal stuff. I haven't played it yet to see what the Unreal Engine layers are, but if it makes the stages look a little bit prettier and has better physics or more cool stuff with the physics, then yeah, it could be fun.
All I can think of, because I am my casual game that I like turn my brain off, put on easy and go, is Everspace 2. They took the time to up to the latest Unreal. Hellblade just dropped major all those looks, but then you see Multiverses taking the time to go to the next Unreal. I have to think, even Halo we know is kind of got elements of Unreal and it kind of making its way in. I have to think it's just a matter of developer ease.
Yeah.
So you don't have to ease them in. That's got to be why, right?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's a part of the larger conversation. I think a lot of folks are trying to figure out what the bang for the buck is. I think everybody's trying to figure out interesting ways to get their engines in order in that way. And it feels like, Unreal Engine 5, even if you're not fully developing in it. It is the biggest buzzword
Mm-hmm.
in development right now of
Mm-hmm.
like, how do you move over to Unreal 5 because of all the tools that you can use within it,
Mm-hmm.
and all the kind of tips and tricks and you can kind of get in there. So we'll see. I think it will be interesting to see what other studios do if they don't use it and
Mm-hmm.
how they're kind of bridging that gap. We saw Kojima with Decima Engine doing his stuff for a long period of time when that engine looks wild every
Yeah.
time you see something new in it.
Mm-hmm.
Unity, even though they're having a lot of troubles in terms of management and all those other things, it is
Mm-hmm.
still a viable place for the indie space to see people kind of move and grow there. And in Unreal 5, now that everything is free, you're seeing folks who never were in the movement of being a developer start to develop things with UEFN on
Mm-hmm.
the Fortnite side, with games like Hellblade really showcasing what it's like to be able to build at the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
And we gotta see Gears on 5. Like
Yeah.
Gears on
Oh.
Unreal 5 is gonna be ridiculous. There's no question in my mind that game is not gonna look stupid when it comes out. It's just gonna be so good. So we'll see.
Do you think we see Gears? Because like I've been willing it to happen. I've been putting my nice little Xbox One X here. I'm
Oh,
willing it to happen. I need to know, and I'll tell you, I'll go so far
oof.
as to say I want to see Gears, not just Gears 6. I want
Yeah.
to know collection or remaster or somehow,
Mm.
some way, like Tactics 2. I want some more Gears love. I love
Ooh.
Gears. I want it, and the idea that I get Doom, Gears, COD in the same showcase. Luke Lore is set.
Yeah.
I'm
I
set.
think I think Summer Games Fest is too small for Gears. I think
So
I
you
think
go
that's a
showcase.
game award. I think that's a game awards thing.
Ooh, so do you think we see it at the Xbox showcase, or do you think it's Game Awards?
Game awards. That's
Hmm.
a big stage. Get everyone on the highest level of visibility.
Hmm.
Because Jeff is like bringing in crazy numbers every year for
Hmm.
his award show. I think those and it's also a thing of like those are things that get pitched early in the year. Like I think Xbox knows what the production looks like in terms of where that game is going, in terms of
Hmm.
how far along it is. And I'm sure Jeff Keighley is definitely knocking on the doors of Xbox to say, when this drops, please do it here.
Hmm.
They already have a relationship. It just makes the most sense in terms of visibility. And he gets to be the person who says, on my platform, we got a chance to showcase one of the biggest games coming back looking this way. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a Game Awards thing for sure.
Are you talking specifically about Gears 6 or the Gears franchise?
Gear 6. Gear
Okay.
6. Yeah.
I got to tell you, it makes so much sense that it breaks my heart
Yep.
because I want it here because like
Yeah.
I just want that like yes, let's go with all the things I like. But the idea that Gears could be on that bigger platform than the Xbox Showcase at the Game Awards, building the relationship with Jeff Keighley, who, to my way of thinking, gets a bad rap from so too many Xbox people because
Sure.
the man like he literally saved presentations and award ceremonies. Like we have to credit that where it's due.
Yeah.
Definitely something. I I'm a little heartbroken that it makes so much sense, but I'm here for it. I do appreciate it.
I mean, look, anybody who's on the coalition team, if you want to put it on the Spawnies, it'll be a
I'll watch
couple
it.
months late. It'll be in February as opposed to December. But we're the second biggest, gaming award show on the planet. So I would say, why not?
I can't say I disagree with that either. Go for
I'm
it.
just
I'm there
saying.
for it.
I'm just saying. I'm just
Let's
saying.
start a movement. Let's
I'm
start a
just saying.
movement.
Spawnies 2025. We got it.
Shout out to Web Dave in the chat. Good to see you. Shout out to Flush Jackson on a hike. Good to know that, man.
Nice.
Enjoy it. Be safe. Be safe. I have to think now because I see Will Lewis's comment right here about Marcus Phoenix COD skin. I was surprised to see Fallout not in COD
Yeah.
first, given
Yeah.
the Xbox owns it and there it is in Fortnite. But I also like the idea that it's in Fortnite and not limited to COD because it shows they're willing to put their stuff where people are.
Yep.
So I like that that idea there. But I am a big sucker for just cross promotion in general.
Oh,
I love that.
1,000%. Like, if you ever wanted to see a company doing it at the highest level, Epic is doing it with Fortnite. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the lawyers, They should bronze their lawyers because their lawyers are doing some of the best and smartest work of doing that IP collaboration than I've ever seen anyone ever do, and they do it
Mm-hmm.
well every time. Like every activation is good. It's like
Yeah,
really well done. So massive shout out to the legal team over at Epic Games.
they're too good. Too
Mhm.
good. One thing we didn't mention, or a couple studios we didn't mention that are kind of on display at Summer Game Fest, one of them being Focus Entertainment. Space Marine 2 is one of those games that to me just looks incredible.
Yep.
Looks like that next gen combat. Do you have any expectations for that title?
I mean, I think a lot of people really dig it. I'm not super familiar with it in terms of playing it. But every time I've heard people talk about it, it's been in glowing terms. So I would expect there to be, not only because of all the sequels that it's gotten, or a lot of the next versions of it that it's gotten, but it
Mhm.
feels like that community is just very very tight knit and really appreciates the what they're trying to build there. So that would be cool. I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised if that drops and we get to see more of that.
I have to ask then, because I've seen so many people kind of just ping me about PlayStation today.
Yeah.
Uh, Showcases, people throwing rumors out there. I don't tend to get stuck on rumors. That's not really my modus operandi.
Yeah.
But PlayStation has been quiet. They are a partner for Summer Game Fest. I know they're light on first party releases this year.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Helldivers second party, and
Mm-hmm.
Stellar Blade kind of carrying the weight quite well, both of them for PlayStation. But I'm curious if we see like Spider-Man DLC at a Summer Game Fest or at PlayStation's own like State of Play or something like that.
I that's probably a state of play.
Mm-hmm.
Like uh, like if they're gonna do a showcase, and they are supposed to be doing a showcase, I forgot when. Um, I mean, I think it winds up being three tiers of stuff, right? You wind up having state of plays for as much smaller, very focused looks at specific games or specific DLC or themes around certain things. Like you maybe get a PSVR 2, state of play, right?
Mm-hmm. Fair.
Showcases are about the future of the platform, future of the ecosystem kind of stuff. So I think it could be in a showcase, but like a quick montage of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I think they have some. They also have some stuff that they need to show that'll be at the Game Awards later this year. I think there are a couple of games that people have rumored to be either dropping soon or getting close to dropping.
Mm-hmm.
That were announced a couple of not Game Fest, or a couple of PlayStation Directs ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of that stuff is going to potentially move into some of those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to figure out like what does that mean for the overarching narrative of where things go.
Mm-hmm.
If we can figure out what that means, then I think that conversation gets a lot bigger for what and where we should have an expectation to see stuff. So I'm hoping, because I feel like Sony has been very very quiet. Like we've had a lot of PC ports, which has been good. I think that's been great for them. Stellar Blade did really really well in terms of sales. That wasn't a surprise, but I think it got a lot bigger, not only with the controversies around it, but also with it being a very good game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they need to also showcase some stuff. Like that was my thing going into Stellar Blade was this is going to be a fun game, but what does this mean for the entire ecosystem of where we see Sony kind of moving?
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't really have a good kind of like line yet of what that means. I don't know in terms of what I have an expectation for Sony to showcase, except besides them talking about no big first party games this year. So
Mm-hmm.
they have some smaller joints that are going to be coming out, but I haven't seen anything yet that has me like uber excited to be like, oh man, I cannot wait for X to drop.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we see that at Summer Games Fest because I know that they have some stuff potentially showing there too. So we may have more information out of about all of this next week. I'm sure we will have more information
Absolutely.
about all of this stuff next week. But I think I can't forecast yet what's moving in that space because I just haven't seen enough yet to know.
Fair. Absolutely fair point. I think about pie in the sky, like hopes, and like I know pie in the sky is where this lives, but when I look at the the PlayStation charts and I see that, they're struggling revenue wise for return of investment and stuff. And then I see other platforms choosing to go multi-platform with some of their exclusives. The idea that Spider-Man might get freed up a little bit, or Will Lewis kind of asking, 5 to 10 COD games or other AB games dropping into Game Pass. The idea that Spider-Man as an IP might free up here and there, maybe some of the older titles get freed up and get to go on the Game Pass, those Activision Beanox games and such.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea that Spider-Man might get to be in more places, because Spider-Man, like Star Wars and DC properties and Marvel, I always kind of want them to live in many places.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And what game did you work on, Ka? Because I know you. What's this?
I worked on Concord. Somebody Will Lewis talked about it in the chat. So I know things about that game that I can't talk about, but I am excited for it. That's
neat. I won't press you there, but that's dope.
Yeah, it's
very cool. Very cool. But yeah, Pie in the Sky. I want some of those IP to free up a little bit. Do you have any Pie in the Sky hopes for Summer Game Fest?
I don't know if it's like very game specific, but I really do hope that we get a chance to see more surprises. Like, I am also very wary of leaks. Like, I am sad to see leaks happen. I think it just sucks all the air out of not only all the good work that all those marketing teams have been doing to kind of get those games in a good spot, but as a fan, I'm just like, oh man, I really just want to be surprised when a new thing hits. And I'm sad when it winds up getting kind of leaked early, that people have gotten a chance to see stuff like that. Even though stuff that we saw from the Wolverine footage, earlier or late last year, I was like, man, that's would have been so cool to just see when it was like done, because I don't think a lot of folks in the community or in the player space have a really good understanding of like, what does it mean to see footage that early of a game, and what state is that game in, and what does that mean when it's in that state, and how you should kind of look at that content. A lot of the expectations and the ways that winds up coming across are not well digested by the internet. Right? People are looking to nitpick things that they don't have enough knowledge about. So I'm just hoping that we get to see some new fun stuff that we just didn't get any information about. Like, I was pleasantly surprised a couple years ago when I got a chance to see Nightingale for the first time. Like, that game is out on early access now, and I haven't seen anything about it since. Like, I don't know what's happening with that game because I haven't had a chance to play it, and it got talked about, which was a really cool concept, but nothing else has come out about it in a way that makes people kind of like excited for it. So I'm hoping that we get some bangers, that we're just like, all of us are all around our computers and looking at that stuff in our phones and being like, I cannot wait to play that. So that's going to be cool to see how all those things kind of land in terms of what the game space will be.
You make a really good point, and I think about how many times in covering video games, Xbox, existing in this kind of enthusiast press realm, which I very much feel is nebulous, right? Like,
sure,
sometimes I don't know if I stand as a fan or I'm reporting on information, and I was a journalist at one point in my life, and there are ethics that come with that, but there's not ethics that you sign on for as a content creator that are the same. They don't always overlap, I guess is what 100%. I'm saying. And so, what leaks and kind of the releasing of information can do ahead of time, rumors as well. It's really hard to know when is the right time to report, because to your point, lots of people work really hard on that stuff. At other times, when it's just news, how do you ignore it and pretend like news didn't happen? And that's the difference, I think, between an FTC self-inflicted wound, Xbox uploading all their stuff, and an insider sharing information, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it, and I'm even in a weirder position where I'm doing content creation with Spawn on Me. I worked at a couple of different studios. I worked at Intel. I worked at Riot. I worked at Firewalk, doing stuff on Concord. And that balance of how do you not only kind of navigate the space just as a content creator who wants to do good work and don't do clickbaity stuff.
Exactly.
while also being a part of the zeitgeist, right? I think I try to take the lead on the bigger sites first.
Hmm.
If the bigger sites kind of go with it, then it feels like it might be okay to do that. But you're also potentially ruining relationships that you have within the industry, right? Like, I think for as much as people complain about the intricacies and the networking possibilities and the kind of chumminess that goes along with being a person who does this kind of work, relationships are the lifeblood of getting anything done in the gaming industry, and that's
Hmm.
honest. Like, I don't know how that plays for people who are on the conspiracy theorist side of thinking that oh my god, folks who are doing this work are shills or all this other kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But there's a respectful relationship that goes across a lot of that stuff, and I think if you're on the journalist side, especially if you're doing like investigative stuff, you have to kind of keep it arm's length because that is a part of the credibility that you have, and also the way that you've been taught to be able to do that work is you need to kind of have this safe space between you and the people you're covering so that you can be objective.
Hmm.
I think that's important, and I also think that you can do that work as a part of the enthusiast press too. Like,
Hmm.
I think people don't talk about that layer of it a lot. And this is a thing that I harp on a lot because I'm like, just because you get flown out to go cover an event or someone sends you a t-shirt, it doesn't, like, it would cost so much money to change my opinion about your product at this point in my career
Hmm.
that that doesn't even play into the thought process for, let me give, use me for an example, let's give Khalief an X amount of stuff
Hmm.
and that'll influence the way he talks about the game that we're going to let him review.
Hmm.
There isn't enough money that you, like, there is enough money in your budget right now to you to for you to be able to do that to me
Hmm.
for my audience and for the voice that I have built, right?
Hmm.
But there are lots of folks who, when we have these discussions about the lines that are drawn and the minutia of what does it mean to be a person who's doing this work respectfully and doing it of note, there's a lot of people who don't have to do that kind of work and still get millions of views and tons of opportunities and all of that stuff.
Hmm.
So I think it really comes back down to, how do you want to kind of maneuver in the space?
Hmm.
How do you really think about relationships in the industry, and what's the value that that brings to you as an individual,
Hmm.
as a person who's trying to make some moves in it and all that kind of stuff? And what is the relationship between you and your audience? Like, I tell everyone, if you've been watching my work over the past 10 years to 12 years now, you have a pretty good understanding of who I am as a human being and how how that intersects with the work, right?
Hmm.
And if you have another form of information that changes that prism for you, please share it with me because I don't know what that is
Hmm.
because I've been pretty consistent
Hmm.
in terms of that stuff. With also having the space to maneuver, I think that's a part of all of this too that I think we always forget is, like, even if you're a person who has a stalwart opinion, right?
Hmm.
All of those things, if you're doing the work of being reasonable and being malleable and being open to new things happening, you should be ingesting all of that information and potentially changing your opinions about things and not getting rigged over the coals because you made a different decision 2 years after you made a declarative statement, right?
Hmm.
But people don't think about that. They're just like, you said a thing 4 years ago, and if that's
Hmm.
not the same thing that you believe now, then you're a shill. And I'm like, that's not the way humans should work.
Right.
So it's a I went on a little bit of a tangent, but I think there's a lot of pieces to all of those, through lines in terms of how do we all do this work
Hmm.
in a way that feels good for all the layers that kind of live underneath it.
I appreciate the point you're making, though. The idea of keeping receipts, I think, is very good, holding
Sure.
people accountable to statements they've made, but also the idea that as human beings, our opinions change, the information we're privy to changes,
Yeah.
the experiences we've gone through change, and at the risk of a self promotion, like the XCP Discord is one of the most welcoming places. There is not a single day that goes by where people aren't saying good morning, asking
Mm.
about the games we're playing to one another. Doesn't matter the platform, being supportive of each other's content creation and enjoying it. And this group, we've been around for, I guess, a year, having a Discord, give or take some time. They let me make mistakes. Like I put out a review on Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League that hindsight I am not happy with.
Sure.
I was so proud. I was so proud of it at the time.
Yeah.
But constructive feedback, letting me make mistakes, step on rakes, figure things out, and then that allowed, I think, Hellblade to be a better experience for me. And that is something I think I see a lot of content creators do quite well and miss the mark on, is existing with their audience and maturing with them.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, I'm looking at the chat while we have the conversation, and it's beautiful. Like, there's
Mhm.
so many folks who are giving each other love and shouting each other out and being
Mhm.
excited for each other. Like, this is what you hope to see in
Mhm.
video game communities. We have so many other elements that are so malformed and so upset about every small thing that it's beautiful to see when people are coming together and enjoying this thing that we should be enjoying. Video games are supposed to be fun. It's the
Mhm.
reason I got into this industry is because I, as a player, wanted to have fun while also making the thing that I wanted to be a part of. And I think if you're setting the example of being a decent human being, and people rock with that, and people understand that, and people give you grace,
Mhm.
then you can build a really fantastic audience of really smart and engaged and inquisitive and fun-loving people who you can build an audience around and build an audience with. I think it's really, really cool to see so many people come together and do that kind of work, uh, and be together in doing that. And Will Lewis says, "Wait, are you saying that we shouldn't make fun of PlayStation fanboys?" I think you should make fun of all fanboys. All
Mhm.
fan like I don't. I think all fanboys deserve to get laughed at a little bit. Like I
Mhm.
think again, this is a time and space where I get very philosophical and I think about the external ways that the world works. And I'm like, 99.9% of the stuff that people fuss about in the video game space has no real relevance in the ways that games get made, in the ways that games get played,
Mhm.
and the way that the actual world outside of games actually affects them. So it's like, there's so many bigger things to get mad about in comparison to who's on what console and all that kind of stuff. So make light fun of people because you also don't want to make fun of people in a terrible punching down way. But I think you know I don't suffer fools and I don't pay attention to fanboy fights because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
I'm very much inclined to agree, and those are words that I wish I understood when I was younger.
Same.
You know.
I was a part of that too. Like again, that's the beauty of getting older too. Like Luke, you've been doing this for a while. I've been doing this for God knows how long. You mature in this thing, and that's also a beautiful part of it. You learn to be humble. You learn to be able to take constructive criticism in a way that you weren't able to do before.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think those are all parts of growing up in this space as creators, as players, as people who care about the industry from the consumer perspective and from the player perspective. Like again, we are part of one of the coolest pastimes on the planet.
Mhm.
We should be spending so much more time learning from each other and giving each other some grace while
Mhm.
also shouting down the bad actors and saying, look, we know you are trying to ruin everyone's fun. We
Mhm.
don't have to allow that, and that's everyone's job. So I stick by that and stand by that. But I think, yeah, make love, not console war.
I love it. $2
Love
super
it.
chat, Will Lewis. Love
Love
it.
it. Love it. It's great.
My best friend of me, Joseph Moran, plays on PlayStation every time we play COD or Fortnite.
Uh-huh.
Now Sea of Thieves. Never affected me. We're having a blast together,
Right?
playing with our friends.
That's what I'm
So
saying.
yeah. Um, Khalif, that is that wraps, I think, a wonderful conversation. I can't thank you enough for being here. Um, I want to thank the chat. I do not expect super chats or uh, channel memberships and stuff, and I'm still in awe when it happens. So thank you guys for hanging out. Khalif, let people know where to find Spawn on Me, what it is you're doing over there, and what kind of coverage they can look forward to.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It was when you hit me up in the DMs. It's been a long time coming. We've been ships in the night trying to get this to work and happen. And it's been so much fun to have been a part of the show. And you continue to do such fantastic work.
Thank you.
And it really does come through, talking about community of how well you've done to foster and curate and build a lovely, lovely community
Thank you.
who's really sticking together and having fun, which we need more of in the industry right now in a much bigger way. So congratulations to you on that, and continue to truck on and make some great content. I'm doing my thing over at twitch.tv/SpawnOnMe. You can check us out there usually every Wednesday, or I'm sorry, every Thursday around 6 p.m. PST. I've been taking some time off and kind of spreading out the love with some of the work, because I've just been busy and tired and stuff. So I'm going to try to get back on the grind and push out more content weekly, but you can check that stuff out on Spotify, where you can check out the video versions of the show mostly. We're on our YouTube channel as well. We've been putting out some good content there. We've been putting out some more social content on our TikTok, but you can also watch us live stream the show. We're going to be doing it again tonight, probably in another hour or so, around 5 p.m. PST. We're going to be rocking on X, on YouTube, and on Twitch, doing a simulcast there, so you can get all the flavors there. And the biggest thing is our Spawnies award show. It's going to be in year 4 next year in February. We do it in Black History Month to give everybody some love. I throw that stat out there. We from my calculations, and hopefully they are not wrong, we are right now the second biggest award show in the video game space, behind the Game Awards, which is a remarkable thing. We're averaging over 300,000 views per show, which is super fantastic. Beautiful mix of hip hop, brown and black culture, alongside the best and the brightest of the video game space, coming to you live every year. So year 4 is coming up soon, so we'll be talking to folks about that. And I have some cool stuff that's coming up pretty soon. I can't talk about it yet because it's happening soon. There's going to be potentially a new show in the mix that I'm going to be producing and working on. It's going to be more of the kind of conversational interview style, but it will not just focus on gaming, which will be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to talk to some really smart people about all the stuff that they do. Mm-hmm. And you may see me doing a couple appearances very, very soon out in the world. So make sure you're keeping check at Khalief Adams on X. And all the other places that SpawnOnMe resides. So again, thank you so much for having me, and much love to everybody in the chat.
Can't say enough good things about your content, about you, and your words. That's pretty cool, man. I'm honored and appreciative you gave me your time today. So thank you, man. Thank you. So, well, I'm gonna once again thank the chat. It's so good to see you guys, and because one of my students is here, Jalen, you're awesome. I taught Jalen for 2 years. Great kid.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's going to be it for us, guys. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Take care.